BMOP Production Studios in the beautiful state of Arkansas, you're listening to the Shattered Podcast with your host, D. Elias.
Today in my studio, I have Joe and Hattie Vance. And Hattie, I'm going to start with you. Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Okay, a little bit about my childhood is I was raised in Eagletown, right across the state line, and my dad was an alcoholic, and I was good in school, but I remember going to church and things like that. When I would do that, it would be like I would have to ask my parents, and sometimes they'd say yes, sometimes they'd say no, and I guess about 13, 14, I remember asking my parents, and they told me that I could either go to the local ball game or I could go to church that week, but I couldn't go to both. And so after that, of course, I chose the ball games. And so running around with my friends and everything, and my dad, he was always drinking at the bar, and we'd go down there and hang out with him. And so I guess by the time I was 16, I was probably an alcoholic. I look back on my life now. And by the time I was 17, I had started using methamphetamine a little bit. But actually, alcohol was my drug of choice. I actually got married at 16, had a shotgun wedding. And because my drinking really had gotten so bad that my parents didn't know how to handle me. And so I ended up in jail, and they had to come to the jailhouse to get me. And that very next day, my dad made me marry my boyfriend so he could get me out of the house.
What'd you go to jail for?
Well, I was driving in Broken Bow, and the laws got behind us because I'd run a red light, and my friend was drinking liquor, and I told him to get rid of it, and he threw it out the window in front of the police.
And they saw him do it.
And so they stopped us and took us to jail. And then I remember about 17 years old, I had a cousin of mine who showed me how to sell methamphetamine and how to quarter it up, do all that stuff that's, with the delivery of it. And he said, if you're going to use a little, here, I'm going to show you how to not cost you anything to do it. And so I just kind of started supplying my friends then. But really, alcohol was my drug of choice. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that meth actually became my drug of choice.
Joe, tell me a little bit about your childhood.
My childhood was kind of hard. It was on a farm, and I was sheltered. I felt like I couldn't go to ball games without sneaking off, and I'd always get in bad trouble. And so I had a lot of rejection, resentment to my dad and my mom for keeping me at home and working me so hard. And I experimented after school. Back then they had an NYC program, and that was a program that you could, if you was poor, that you could work at the school, and they would pay me to work at the school and in the afternoons. And so we would experiment with drugs, and I'd mop floors and sweep floors and clean desks, and so that was my first experience with drinking and drugging a little bit. And then it just progressed. At the age of 18, I went to Dallas to pick up a load of drugs. We got marijuana. We got it was hash, and it was a lot of downers. And on the way back, I just felt like I was going to be in trouble big time because I'd left town. And so when I got back, I hid out at my friend's house, and we all got busted. And back then, it was a pretty big bust. And I got offered, when I went to court, I got offered you can go to the military or you can go to prison. And of course, I signed up to go to the military real quick.
Right. Hattie, tell me a little bit about what triggered your addiction.
I think I learned real young that alcohol, I just loved what alcohol did to me. My first time I got drunk, I remember I was 14 years old and we had a big slumber party, and all my friends from school was there, and we had got alcohol, of course, and I got so drunk and just stumbling down, throwing up, drunk, and I remember it just gave me so much courage, and I could just say anything. I didn't feel pain anymore, and I remember even after being so sick the next morning, my friends were like, "You were just outrageous," and I was like, "That was so cool." I loved it, and what I learned was that I had a really meek spirit, but it gave me that ability just to tell people what I wanted to
Right.
tell them without any kind of, hindrance or barrier. And so I guess it gave me boldness, and that I had been looking for because I was so insecure in myself. But then on the meth, really, what triggered my addiction was grief. I had someone that I loved very much, and we were supposed to get married, and he got killed in a car wreck on the way from Oklahoma. And that was actually when my parents learned that I was selling drugs that same very night, because I had drugs in my car and I had to have them, get them so I didn't end up getting in trouble. But after that, I just numbed everything that I had because I couldn't handle my emotions.
Right.
I didn't know how to feel or to work through feelings, because what I'd been taught or what I'd been modeled was you suppress those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You either drink, cuss, fight, or just, there's no release except for that.
Right.
And so I just drowned myself in drugs and alcohol. And it just really took me down through there.
Right. Tell me a little bit about yours, Joe, and what happened while you was in the military.
In 1975, I had a car accident, and we had before we got shipped out overseas. I was worried about going overseas, and so we had a 2-day weekend that we could come home, and me and another boy took off, and he had some Valiums, and I was drinking tequila, and so I mixed those two, and he was smoking pot, and he was driving my car, and we was going over 100 mile an hour, and we clipped a car coming out of an own exit, and we hit 5 vehicles and a semi, and it throwed him out one way and throwed me out the other way. Throwed me 62 feet, him 108 feet, and they covered us up for dead because our pulse was so low that they couldn't even find a pulse on us. And so once we got us to the hospital, I raised up with a sheet on me, and then they realized that we wasn't dead, and so they moved us to the hospital, and I I was pretty bad off. I had brain injury. I had 5 fractures in my skull, and my skull was swelling, and got shipped to San Antonio to the Army hospital. I spent 8 months in the Army hospital, and there's where I got on the morphine, because that was military had a bad habit of giving you any kind of opiate, and so I got on the morphine real bad, and that was probably one of my hardest things that was able to conquer.
Right.
And then I had a second wreck. After 8 months, I got released from the hospital, and on this very same day, I had another wreck in Austin, Texas, coming home. And I got thrown out of the car again, and I got shipped right back again. And I spent 3.5 months that time, and I had another brain injury, and so back on morphine again. And so that was pretty much the end of my military career. I was placed in medical hold, and it took a year for them to discharge me from medical hold.
Right. Tell me a little bit, Hattie, about your rock bottoms.
I had several rock bottoms. I think the first rock bottom was when I had lost my dad, and there was with grief, and once again, just like my fiance that got killed, there was grief. But I lost my dad, and then I had a new boyfriend relationship. I had relationship issues because, looking for love in all the wrong places. Right. And I had been introduced to IV drugs, and within 3 weeks of that, I was sitting in the county jail with a manufacturing charge, and I had lost my daughter. I had lost my nursing career, and there I was just locked up and hopeless. Because we didn't have money for bond, and I didn't see any way out that this was ever going to change. That was the one major rock bottom. And the second major rock bottom was, not long after that. I had went to rehab for a year on that charge, and I got out, was doing really good, and I think I had 18 months clean, and I was going to court to fight over my daughter. And my whole recovery had been based on the fact that I was fighting to get my kid back home. Right. And when I went to court and I didn't get her, because at that time I was on a walker, I couldn't hardly get around, and I had started using, I was taking pain medicine just to be able to walk. And nobody had really taught me about hydrocodone, and that you couldn't really take them because that would feed your addiction. I just knew that I was off meth and alcohol. And I wasn't taking them for anything other than just for my pain so that I could walk. But they terminated my parental rights because of that fact. And so since my whole recovery had been based on the fact of getting my daughter back, and when they terminated my parental rights and wouldn't let me see my daughter, I had no reason to stay clean anymore.
Right. It was a great
and
setback.
So I went that same very day, I was right back on methamphetamine and alcohol because I didn't have any desire to live.
Right.
I'd lost my dad, I'd lost my kid, I'd lost my career, and there was no hope for me. And so I just wallowed right back into drugs. And it was during that time, right after that's when I met Joe. And Joe had just come out of prison his second time, and he had been diagnosed with cancer, and that's why they had released him from prison. And so here was Joe, he had medical issues, and here I had medical issues too, and there was just a really strong connection, because here we didn't have much hope. We had drugs, we had dope, and
a lot in common.
Yeah, we had a lot in common. And we was both just kind of lost in life, but it was something about him that just kind of sparked some hope in me that I'd never had before, not in a long time.
Right. Tell me about your rock bottom.
That's a hard one there for me, because my rock bottom was I got married for the first time before I went to service. I met this girl, and I was a child that didn't have a bunch of girlfriends. So I met this girl, and I just fell head over heels in love with her, and she ended up getting pregnant, and I went on to service, and then of course I had the car wreck, and I had another car wreck, so we were separated for a long time. But then when I come home, I couldn't keep her out of the bars, and I'd have to fight the people that she was with all the time. Well, after a while, I had to divorce her. I just couldn't handle it no more. Well, the child was involved, and so I went to court and proved that the child was not mine, that I was in service, that there's no possible way it could be mine. Knowing all along in the back of my head that that was probably not right. And so that was something I had to live with for 17 years. That was something that I had to say it never happened. And you know, we don't hide our faults. We
Right.
have to admit our faults. We have to get out of bondage. And that was probably one of my biggest accomplishments, being able to get a hold of her. And I have a relationship with her now. And she loves me, and I love her. And of course, we know where she come from.
Right. That's very good. It's very good. Does she live around here?
Lives next to me.
Oh, really? That's very good. um, how many years have y'all been in sobriety as of today?
Joe and I was charged in 2006 for what we went to prison on. And so 2007, when we were locked up, the last time that we used. And so we came home in 2011. So I'd say 2007 to 2019, going on 12 years.
Very good.
Yeah.
Going back just a little bit, tell me a little bit about how y'all met.
Okay, it's it's a funny story because we had a mutual friend in Eagletown, and I had went over there to see that friend, and it was somebody in the drug world, of course, and I had went over there and visited, and on my way out, I left, got in the car, and Joe seen me walk across the yard, and he told his friend, he said, "See that girl? That's going to be my next wife." And he said, "Now, Joe, she's out of your league. That's not going to happen." And so we laugh a lot of times when we see that friend. But and then the next time I seen Joe, he was going to buy this car, and I had seen this car, and it could barely make it out of the yard. And I walked up to him and I said, "Joe, you don't want that car. It's a piece of crap." And he didn't know me from Adam, and so he said he just fell in love after that. But me and Joe become really fast friends, and anyway, I guess that's where he can fill in the story.
Well, you know, it was one of those situations where she was in a relationship, and you know, I didn't really care for the boy that she was with. I felt, you know, she was on a walker then, and so I've really had compassion for people that has a health problem. And so I seen how bad he was acting, and so I ended up getting him high that night, and I walked him to the door and told him to have a good day, but don't come back.
Right.
And so we ended up, I stayed with her for a month, and then I told her, I said, "You get a hold of that boy and see if you want to stay with him." And so she went and got a hold of him, and of course, that afternoon she come back in and she flopped on my tailgate and said, "It's over." And I said, "Well, can I have a kiss?"
Yeah, I told him, I said, "I choose you, Joe." And we've been together ever since.
Right.
How long have y'all been together?
We got married in 2007, right before we went to prison. So we spent our first 4 years of being married incarcerated.
Oh,
Yes.
And the only thing that we could have was a letter between the two of us. We didn't see each other for 4 years.
It's one heck of a honeymoon.
Yes, it was.
Well, now we did live together for a little while.
Yeah, we did live together for a year.
We lived together for a little over a year, and I knew that we was going to go to prison. I knew that, and that was an interesting story because she had been praying that the police lock us up because we had got so bad.
I was praying that God would help us.
Yes.
And, when I tell my testimony, I say that's how God helped us because He sent the drug task force to bust us because He knew that's what it was going to take because we wouldn't stop on our own.
Right. And it worked.
It
Right.
worked.
Definitely.
It worked. Matter of fact, when we went to prison, we ended up going through a program called IFI. It's now the Pathway to Freedom program at the Wrightsville unit. And at that time, they had a women's program and a men's program. It's an 18-month faith-based program. And so I got in it at first, and then I wrote Joe and said, you need to get in this program. That God had already kind of started working on our life. And so Joe ended up getting into it, and we became the first husband and the wife to actually complete that program together in the state of Arkansas. And so we ended up doing the 18 months in prison portion, and then they asked us to stay on for another 18 months to be restorative counsel, kind of like peer guides for the next fall group. So Joe and I actually spent 36 months in that program, and that's where God just radically transformed our life and taught us His Word, because that's one of the things that I learned was that the Word says that my people perish for lack of knowledge. Well, I didn't have any knowledge of God. All I had knowledge of is how to hustle, how to live in Eagletown, and how to survive. And so it just really changed my life.
Right. I'm going to read some facts about CR, which is Celebrate Recovery. And then I would like for y'all to tell me how y'all became CR leaders, Celebrate Recovery leaders, what it was like when you first started and what it's like today. Right now, there are 37,000 churches all over the world, 2 in Ukraine, 30% chemical addiction, 70% everything under the sun. So even if you're having stress over a loved one dying or whatever, it helps with non-addiction areas too.
Absolutely.
If you're just having a bad day.
Yes.
29 years that Celebrate Recovery has been growing. They have grown from 25,000 to 37,000 just in the last 4 years. The Beatitudes, did I say that right? Beatitudes of Christ is based on the 12 steps, 2 phases of program, large group and open share. This is why we do this, pulling people up. CR crosses every denominational, social, economic, and racial barriers.
Yes.
So it's grown from 25,000 to 37,000 just in the last 4 years. That is just amazing.
Yes.
So when you got out of prison, is that when you started Celebrate Recovery here in DeQueen?
Yeah. Well, not exactly. We learned about Celebrate Recovery while we were in prison. And they come in and they taught a class, and that's when I first heard about it. And so once we went through that program, we was told to get into a pro-social group, and that was part of the requirements for reentry. And so, of course, church, but we also knew in order to keep our sobriety, we needed to attend NA, AA, CR, something, and there was no CR here. And so we joined NA, and we did that for 4 years, I think. And the whole time we was taking people to church with us continually, and we kept telling Pastor we wanted to be involved in ministry, and we wanted to do jail ministry, and he kept putting us off. He said, first year, he said, come back, talk to me next year. And the second year, we went to tell him, and we're still involved. We still want to be in ministry. And he said, come back and talk to me next year. So we were already in church like 3 years. And then finally he said, well, we still can't get into the jail, but how about we start Celebrate Recovery? And so we went through it with some of our foundational people. And then when we launched, I'd say Joe says we had about 8, and then we grew to 20. And then now today, we're going on 3 years this month. April 29th will be our 3-year mark. And we went from 20, we've had as many as 70, but we at least run around 45 every Friday night.
That is great.
Yes.
If someone listening would like to start Celebrate Recovery, where do they go? How do they get started?
So if somebody wants to start Celebrate Recovery, then they can they can actually look on the Celebrate Recovery website, and there will be a group locator, so they can click on that, put in their zip code. It'll show them where there's a meeting. But also, we have representatives for each portion of the state, and so they would find out what representative covers their area and get in contact with that representative, and then they would get them on the right track to start their own in their church.
Is there certain qualifications that they need to have?
A willing heart of servantship.
Right.
And, that was one of the big things when we actually decided that we would do Celebrate Recovery. I felt like I was not qualified because I thought, well, I know how to deal with addicts and alcoholics. And so I felt like Joan. I wanted to run as fast as hard as I could because I didn't know how to handle all this. And then the Lord started showing me. I'd been through grief. I've been through anger. I've been through dysfunctional families. I'd been through loss. And so the Lord started showing me all these things that I had lived through, so therefore I could help others. And so that's all you got to be.
Right.
Is just real and raw and transparent and love the Lord and willing to help somebody else.
Right. When you first got out of prison, I remember you telling me this. You was almost afraid to go to church because you were afraid of how people would look at you. Tell me, I know the church that y'all went to. How was the first day in church? I mean, apparently it went a lot better than you thought it was going to.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to answer that? Or you?
The first day, we was a little nervous, but Pastor had called us aside, and he wanted to talk with us after church, and he said that don't worry about anything. We'll love on you. And I was just amazed how the people was greeting us, and I thought, this can't be so. This really can't be so. And of course, I had been on fire for God for 36 months while I was in the penitentiary. So I wanted to start something. I wanted to be a part of something so bad. And then every time we went, it got better and better and better. And then, our heart just, it's amazing how that people showing love to people will change your thinking.
Absolutely. That's what church and Christianity is all about.
Mm-hmm.
You don't care about their past. I mean, everybody's there to praise the Lord. And so it doesn't matter.
Now, just to kind of add to what Joe was saying, it's the stigmatism of society. It's one of the reasons that we were scared of going there, because society says they are a criminal, they're not worthy, and so that's what we expected. And also our own shame and guilt of what we had done, and it's very hard to carry all that and then walk in a place with your head held high because you're full of shame.
Right.
And then, but nobody treated us any different. They just loved us.
And now, you said a while ago that at first you could start Celebrate Recovery, but you couldn't do anything in the jail. That's not the same today.
No, it's not.
No.
And that's because of our pastor. He just kept on and on and on at the sheriff's department because he knew he had two people who was willing to serve that could make a difference.
Very passionate, yeah.
Yes.
He saw your passion.
Yes. And finally we had a sheriff that would open up the jail to us and a jail administrator and the first time that they called us and said, okay, you can come in here and would you start Celebrate Recovery in our jail? And the first conversation that I had was that, do you realize that me and Joe can't do this? It's going to take a team of people. And I said, and do you also realize the team of people is going to be people with stories just like ours,
right,
that can go in there and impact? Those are the people they're going to listen to. And I said, are you willing to do that, to open your jail to that? And they said, we are. And from there, it's just transformed. And
it's worked.
Yes, it's worked.
It's worked. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you feel you need to share to help someone else in a similar situation?
I just want to share a little bit more about Celebrate Recovery.
Okay.
Is that, we have this stigmatism that it's just for addicts and alcoholics out there, but it's not. It's for anybody with a hurt, a habit, or a hang-up. And that's all of us.
Right.
We all have a story. We've all been through things that has impacted our lives and, sometimes on a daily basis. And so we're just a safe place. We're a safe place to talk. We're a safe place to have friends. And, that's one of the reasons we have Friday night, because what would typically you do on a Friday night? You go party, you go out. So we're a good place to be on a Friday night.
This gives you a safe place to go.
Yes.
So if someone is going through a bad divorce or anything that is their life is spinning out of control, they should seek Celebrate Recovery.
Yes. What we do at Celebrate Recovery, we just go through our life and we let God heal us from the inside. And that was one of the big things that I had to learn when I transitioned from NA to CR. I had to learn that I couldn't fix people, that only the Holy Spirit could. Right. And so my control issues, I had to kind of back off of those and let God work on them. But as they start to work their steps, as they start to look at their life, they can see where they went wrong and start to mend those things. And even if they were a victim, they get to heal from those things that their abuser caused on them.
When y'all first go into the jail, a lot of times their head's still cloudy because they're still coming down. What type of a change do you see from the time you go in till they are released from jail?
I would say, let me say this first. Let me say that some of the people that's in jail, we sold drugs to. So they knew us personally.
Right.
And so once they see our life now,
right,
and be able to give them hope that they can change, the most of the people that's in the jail now are craving some kind of something to hang on to that's more than their self.
Right.
And so we really enjoy going in, but it gives us a sense of what am I trying to say?
Hope.
Yes, it gives us a sense of hope to be able to help someone that we know that all their life they've battled a drug addiction.
Right.
And it's real bad in the jail, and so.
And just to kind of add to what we see is, a lot of times it's they're thin, their face is sunk in, and they'll be thinking they look cute,
right,
but they're not.
Right.
and there's just darkness over them because of desperation and hopelessness. But as we start to minister to them and others in the community start to minister to them, we see them and they just start to lighten up.
Right.
They lighten up, they fill out, they get healthy once again.
Right. Well, when they first go in, their self-esteem is just nothing.
Right.
So low.
Right.
Right.
So you're there to help them,
build that back.
build the self-esteem back up.
Yes.
But we've seen in the county jail now the glow of the people inside there now is just amazing.
Right.
They're studying the Bible. They're doing things that is unheard of anywhere else. It's amazing to know that the county jail is doing what they're doing.
Right. I hope many more start.
Yes.
Yes, I do too.
Is there anything else about Celebrate Recovery?
I think well, what I see as Celebrate Recovery is it's also, we build disciples. And so, it's just like going through the Bible, but we break it down simplified, easy, layman's terms, like me and you just talking, how we can understand it and apply it to our life. And so it's that application process is actually where we start to change. It's where we change our thoughts, where we change our actions. And when we start to apply those simple rules for life to our lives, and that's where our future changes. That's where the hope comes from.
Right.
That's where we can change everything about us to break addiction or to break sadness of the grief. It's by applying God's word to our life, and that's what we do.
And it's you don't stop until the miracle happens.
Right.
They have to come and come and
Right.
come. And then eventually they get where they're getting something.
Right.
And they're feeling better and they're able to
Right.
cope with everyday stress.
Right. It may not happen overnight, but it
Right.
will happen.
Right. And those are the people, once they start getting it, is that gets to give back
Absolutely.
to others, the others that are coming in.
You can't keep it without you give it away.
Right. So if someone out there would like to check out Celebrate Recovery, it's celebraterecovery.com, and they would type in their zip code,
Yes, go to the group locator.
and it'll let you know where there's one closest to their area.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And when you first started here in DeQueen, were there very many in Arkansas?
At that time, Foreman had just started theirs, and so they were actually there was Foreman and then Texarkana, the bigger towns, but not in the small,
And
small
there
areas.
needs to be in small areas.
Yes, there does. And matter of fact, right here in our area, we're growing, and so we have the one here in DeQueen, and they're potentially looking at one in Eagletown and Broken Bow, and they have one in Idabel. So around our area, it's starting to pop up. We
Right.
have one in Nashville, but there needs to be more.
Right. In the rural areas, for sure.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you would like to add, Joe?
I just want to thank the jail administrator and the sheriff and our pastor for being able for us to be a part of Celebrate Recovery.
Go ahead and tell the church that Celebrate Recovery is at here in DeQueen.
The church here is DeQueen First Assembly. And we meet every Friday night at 6 o'clock. We start with a meal from 6 to 6:30. This gives us an opportunity to fellowship. And then large group starts at 6:30 to 7:30. So it's kind of like we do a lesson, we do praise and worship, we do a lesson related to recovery. So like action or turn or something like that. And then correlating weeks, we do a testimony night so people can see that other people have overcame.
Right.
So we do that for the first hour, and then the second hour we meet in small groups, and it's gender specific. So we have a men's group and a women's group where we actually get to share a heart and build relationships with others who are also struggling. And we do that every Friday night at DeQueen First Assembly.
And you were saying this past Friday, there was people here from Eagletown
Right.
to check out how the Celebrate Recovery programs, because they want to get one started in Eagletown, which is wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think they're going to start a step study. To start one, you need to be able to have some leaders, and our leaders went through the step study, and so they're going to have to go through the step study, and then eventually they will set a date.
Yes. They're going to
start
work
it.
on the foundation of leadership,
Right.
which is very important.
Right.
Because we got to build the foundation before we can build the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think this is some very good information. And I'm very proud of the work that y'all have done on Celebrate Recovery, because I know people look up to y'all, and you've inspired a lot of people.
thank you. One of the things I was telling one young man last night is he was thanking me for just helping him. And I told him, I said, doing the Celebrate Recovery is kind of like repentance of my sin. I know that I destroyed a whole lot of lives in my addiction when I was selling drugs to people in the community. And this is my way to
Right.
be repentant of my sin and to help build back those lives that the enemy used me to help destroy.
Right.
And so, I just keep giving back because I know what the Lord's given to me, and I know that other people can rise back up too.
Well, since y'all have been back in the community, you've helped a lot of people.
Yes.
So that
And our prayer is to help a whole lot more.
more. That's
Yes.
right. Absolutely. Just keep it coming. Okay. Thank you both very much for being here.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
for
us.
having
Okay.
us.
Is that a wrap?
Yep.